You're listening to the Paranormal Peeps on the Darkcast Network. Come to the dark side of indie podcasts with the Darkcast Network.
We have cookies. Between the realm of the dead and the journeys of the living, join Josh, Jamie, and Elisa as they delve into the vast world of the paranormal and breathe life back into the history of the departed.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Paranormal Peeps podcast. And I'm Elisa.
I'm Jamie.
And I'm Josh.
And we are back for round 3 of talking about the 50 states that have haunts in homes and hotels and
museums.
Mm-hmm.
It's the 50 states of hauntingness.
Yes, hauntingness.
Hauntingness. Let's just make up our own words.
Exactly.
It's late. I mean, it is almost 3 o'clock in the morning.
It is. I will say this has got to be the latest we've ever recorded an episode.
And the most that we've ever recorded in one sitting.
Yes.
Yes.
But we're on it.
Number 4.
And we're going to jump right into it.
All right, so we'll jump right in with New Jersey, and this is called the Spy House. It dates back to 1663 and was actually famously used as a tavern during the Revolutionary War. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot on this one, but the ghost sightings actually include a woman in white, like no surprise there, and hearing mysterious sobbing noises, and it's also reported that it's haunted by a sea captain. It does not give a name, so they may not know who it is. Okay, no, but I doubt it, but okay.
I wonder, who the sobbing noises are coming from. If the house was full of sadness or something or what, I don't know. I have heard sobbing audibly a few times. I have heard it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't scare you. I've heard it where it's been very loud, and I've heard it when it's been quiet, when you're like, did you just hear that? I'm pretty sure that was somebody crying.
Yeah.
And I've heard it where I've been in 5 feet from it, and you're like, oh man, what is wrong? Are you okay?
Yeah.
And so it is like a feeling of sadness. It really is. So you wonder what the story is behind that.
Yeah, what kind of pain and suffering that one endured to continue to sob.
Yeah, I actually heard while I was watching a celebrity ghost stories kind of thing. It wasn't that. It was something else. But this guy, he grew up on a property where it was a bunch of museum places, kind of like if you were to go to Benson Gristmill, and there's a lot of houses with different things there, right?
Yeah.
Him and his father was this museum, not owner, but watched over it all, and like a manager. And they lived on the property, and the boys, they had 2 boys, and they would sneak off and try to find the different buildings that they could sneak into. And they said that they could sneak into most all of them, but then they went to one of them and they were just looking through the window. It was like this main big house, and they ran over in the middle of the night and went and peeked in the window, and he saw a man at the table in funeral garb and just crying. Aww. And then stopped and just stared turned his head and just stared at him.
Ooh.
And what had happened in the past was I believe it was his daughter. I can't remember if it was his daughter or wife. I think it was his wife died. And he was so distraught. This man, he sat and cried at her bed for 3 months after.
Oh, jeez.
And so even though she was gone and passed and stuff, he was just so hurt by it. So he actually saw that. And I would have to say, I have never heard a man cry in a haunting. I've only heard females.
Yeah.
Or children.
Women or children.
I have not heard a male.
Mm-hmm.
So, and for him, this scared the crap out of him. And because it was soul deep.
Yeah.
That look and feel.
Yeah.
It was soul deep. I haven't heard male cries. That's not a common thing.
It's not.
The Spy House, that was its nickname. It was really known as the Seabrook Wilson House.
Oh.
Okay.
And today it's actually known as the Bay Shore Waterfront Park and Activity Center.
So it's had a few different names. Sorry,
Yeah.
I just hit the
So
microphone.
lots of stories of the paranormal have surrounded the Seabrook Wilson house. They say since the 1970s.
So more recent.
So this home has been overlooking the Sandy Hook Bay since the 1700s.
Oh, wow. That's a long time.
It goes back way further.
Goes back in the 1600s.
Yeah. And, the tales of this historic property really varies depending on who is telling them. But isn't that true with all
Right.
haunting stories and stuff?
Same thing with fishtails.
Yeah.
It was this big.
Oh, I was like, what are you talking about?
So some of the experienced activity include Abigail, who is a woman who stares out to the sea looking for her dead husband.
That's always sad.
So that's sad. Remember they always had the widow's walks?
Yeah, on the top.
Yeah.
Yep.
So also children playing in the yard are seen. And they see it with their own eyes as they dissipate.
Oh, that's so cool.
That would be, can you imagine like driving by and like, oh, look at those kids. What?
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Where'd they go? I'm out of here.
Yeah. So it says that it played an important role in the history and eventually did come one of the most haunted houses in America. The home was constructed in the early 1700s. Some believe it was constructed in 1664, but they found that to be not true. Daniel Seabrook built the 1.5-story, one-room cabin after purchasing 202 acres of land from his stepfather, and that was in 1696. So his stepfather's name was Thomas Whitlock. And Whitlock already owned a property in Middletown Village, where the Kings Highway area of Middletown was located. Today, they kind of confuse them. One thing that they know is that Seabrook is living in the house by the early 1700s. By 1717, Daniel gave the property to his son, James Seabrook, and in 1730, James Seabrook gave the property to his son, Daniel Seabrook. So they're just passing it on down the line, basically. The property exchanged hands in the Seabrook family until 1850, when the property was sold to Lydia Seabrook's husband, William Wilson. So, and that is why it becomes the Seabrook Wilson house.
So it's Will Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
because the descendants of the Wilson family live there, so it was just handed down. So between 1900 and 1955, the property was rented out as a boarding house, an inn, a restaurant, and a beachside resort.
Oh, wow.
And then it ended up vacant in the mid-1950s. And the local residents actually saved the property from demolition in 1967 by pushing the township to buy the site. So from there, the Middletown Township Historical Society opened it up as a Shoal Harbor Maritime Museum, which was focused on the history of the Bay Shore and its fishermen.
Did they get all 202 acres as well? Because that's a lot of land.
It doesn't say. It just says the house.
Wow.
So, and in the 1970s, the museum's curator began to interject tales of the paranormal during the tours. So I wonder if these are factual or not. So she starts telling some stories that started kind of getting some interest from the people. One of the stories changed the name of the property by which it is still known today, the Spy House. Thomas Seabrook, they lived in the house during the time of the Revolutionary War, and throughout the majority of the war, the British had control of New York City and Sandy Hook, so therefore controlled the waterway. So Seabrook's house was like a beacon, and it was actually a target for the British because it was located on the shore of the Sandy Hook Bay. It sounds like this is like where this gal combines both facts and non-documented stories together.
Some almost historical fiction.
Yeah. So she tells a story that Seabrook was using his home as a tavern, got British soldiers drunk, and then listened for the military secrets they were telling.
I actually have heard things like that before.
Yeah. It's not uncommon back in the days, right?
It is not uncommon.
So we do know that Thomas Seabrook applies for a tavern license in 1803, but that's 20 years after the war was actually over. So yeah, it's hard to say.
A little stretch of fiction there.
And then they got the ghost of Abigail. These have circulated for years about Abigail, woman who stares out the window looking for her husband who died at sea. A lot of people had experience while taking the tours. This one gal says, I saw a woman standing by the water. She describes this woman as wearing a long black skirt and a red blouse with a cap on her head and her hair tied back with a black bow. Fearing the woman who looked upset, this tourist mother approached the figure who didn't move. She then walked back to her car, turned around, and saw the woman dissipate.
Weird.
So Abigail's been seen there waiting for her husband. But surely if she knows that he died at sea.
That's why I wonder if it's residual, just because I'm sure they did that over and over and over again.
Oh, I'm sure.
Waiting for the ship to come in.
Because there's no contact, so they don't really know what day. They just know a roundabout time frame.
Exactly.
I mean, if they do transatlantic, it takes months. So they're gone half a year to go to and from England or to and from Africa or wherever they were going. So, I mean, you just wait. Yep. And that's why they had the widows walk up on top of the houses, because one, you got a good view of the ocean.
Yep.
And two, they would just wait for people to come by. Awful.
That would be terrible.
Makes it nice now that we got phones and all this stuff where we can actually call and say, hey, look, I'm running late.
I know.
All right. So we are going to move into Virginia in a place called the Ferry Plantation House.
Whenever I hear plantation, I'm like, it's going to be good.
This one's really cool. So this house was built in the 1600s.
That is so long ago. For the States, this is as old as it gets, really.
This is pre-colonial. This is people that were actually colonizing.
Yeah.
The country.
Right.
So it was named Ferry Plantation as one of the 11 stops that a ferry would run up and down the Lynn Haven River, transporting, things like goods and people and animals. The funny thing is the signal to call the ferry operator at that point in time was a cannon. Fire off a cannon and they would come running.
Jeez.
Yeah. Place has seen a lot of stuff, right? Including its own witch trial. So there was a famous witch trial in 1698 of a Grace Sherwood, and her neighbors accused her of bewitching their pigs to death and failure of their cotton crops.
The things they come up with, right? I don't know. So I have to wonder if they even thought that was far-fetched, Just somebody to blame.
Yeah. Well, one of her neighbors even went so far to claim that Grace had come into her house one night and left through the keyhole or crack in the door like a black cat.
Oh, my heavens. What were they drinking?
Don't know. Eventually, after the rumors and accusations continued, Grace was brought to trial in 1706. So they accused her for 8 years of being a witch.
That's terrible.
After a lengthy investigation into the allegations, the court justices decided to test Grace to see if she was a witch. So the practice...
Let's see if she floats.
Exactly. Practice called ducking, with her hands and feet bound together. She was tossed from a boat into the area of the Lynn River known as Witch Duck Creek. If she sank, it was confirmation of her innocence.
So she dies anyway.
Right. Water being a pure element, it would mean she was accepted by it. However, if she floated, she was presumed guilty because, obviously the water was rejecting this lady. And so here's the thing is if she floated, obviously she was guilty, right? Well, Sherwood managed to free herself from the binds and float to the top. She was convicted of witchcraft and spent 7 years in prison.
Well, at least you've spent time in prison and not killed.
Exactly.
Like burned.
Exactly. You stoned, burned, hung like in Salem.
Yep, it's all terrible.
So her ghost is said to be one of the ghosts at Ferry Plantation. The place of her trial was Prince Anne County Courthouse. The waters she had mercilessly been dumped and water served as the final judgment and jury of her case. She is said to be buried under one of the large trees on the plantation. She is reported to be one of the 11 ghosts on the property.
Dang.
Oh, wow.
So she's the most popular spirit, right? But then you've got Sally Rebecca Walk. In 1751, William Walk built the Walk Manor on the plantation. His daughter Sally lost her fiance John in the war and is said to roam the plantation as she's waiting for him to return. In 1836, she planted a magnolia tree in his memory, and she is seen wandering around the gardens. There are stories also of an African-American ghost that comes up from the basement. The ghost walks across the room, kneels in front of the wall, intently doing some long-ago chore. A few minutes later, the man would get up, leave the room, back down into the basement. Years later, when renovating the room, a fireplace was found behind the wall.
That's cool.
It's been discovered through paranormal investigations that his name was Henry, and he lived on the 3rd floor in the slave quarters. He lived his entire life on the plantation and is content with his life, had nowhere better to go, and loved going fishing.
That's sweet.
Yeah, it's really neat.
It's cool because, like, right when you said he knelt by the wall, I'm like, there's got to be a
Yeah,
fireplace.
stoking the fire.
Yep.
So, obviously, in colonial days, right, shipwrecks were common. Storms, ice, collisions, strandings, not paying attention, drinking too much at the wheel.
Don't drive drunk.
Right. Don't drive drunk and don't pilot a ship drunk. So the most feared thing, though, was a fire. Because obviously you're in a wooden vessel, you're on the water, and, well, let's face it, fire breaks out and you're hosed.
Yep.
Why? There's plenty of water around you to put it out.
So there are lots of reports of lost souls that are hanging around from shipwrecks that are on the plantation.
Yeah, I believe it.
So a shipwreck listed on the great site of Wikipedia is recorded in January 1st, 1811, where the ship Lucy wrecked in Cape Henry. It's hard to say if that's, which ones. They didn't have any names of them, but they said that they're spotted there. There's a lady in white who roams around the house. She reportedly died when she broke her neck falling down the stairs in 1826.
Ouch.
Do we think all these ladies in white are just one singular lady in white? She just travels.
It's possible.
Well, and
It's a lady in white.
And I also wonder too, though, because when an apparition, not every time, but like when people see apparitions start to form, they see like a white cloud.
Yeah.
White or gray?
White or gray.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure gray because it's dark, you know? But I really wonder if they call it white because that's what's happening. I don't know. It's
Could
just
be.
it's a thought. It's a theory, right?
Yeah. So there's also 2 children who've been reported being seen, a boy and a girl. They're up on the 2nd floor landing, and they like to press up against the walls. Paranormal investigators favor the spirit of the little boy named Eric, who fell from a low window somewhere around 1850. He may have been the little boy on the staircase landing.
Wow.
So, and then former owners Charles and Isabel McIntosh lost their 5-year-old daughter in 1860. She could be the little girl. And then obviously you've got floods and other things that are happening over the lands. So just kind of leave it at that, saying there's also many potential other ghosts because of, let's face it, that area was, a colonial hotbed.
Yeah.
And so you don't know how many other ghosts and stuff that are from the colonial era that are there.
Right.
By far one of the oldest places on this list.
Yeah. Now we're moving on to McPike Mansion. And this is in Alton, Illinois. The account of hauntings for this former boarding house go all the way back to the 1940s. So back then, boarders would hear children playing when no children lived there. Though it was abandoned for decades, people passing by would see faces in the windows. The ghostly presence of a former owner was also seen wandering the grounds. So Sharon, she is someone that was working there, and she was working in the garden, and she saw a ghost of a man named Paul, and he was a previous owner of the house after the McPikes had the house built. And he was standing by a window in the house, and he was wearing the exact same outfit as one that he was wearing in the picture that Sharon has of him. And the wine cellar is said to be the most haunted location of the whole property. Footsteps and voices have been heard, and The heavy metal door that leads to the cellar has been seen moving on its own. A strange, unexplainable mist has even been reported following guests as they move through the cellar. So this has a decent amount of ghosts.
Reported
Yeah.
activity. Yeah.
I like the mist stuff because it's like ambiguous. It's like, there's a mist. It's like, yeah, that's a tough time to say anything about what's going on there.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on to New Mexico, and we have the Luna Mansion. This place was built for Don Antonio Jose Luna by the Santa Fe Railroad in 1880 in exchange for the right of way through the family hacienda. Hacienda. So numerous trips through the South inspired the design of style and architecture, although the basic material is handmade adobe brick. The Luna and Otero families immigrated from Spain in the early 1690s and settled in Rio Abajo, or Lower River, a portion of the Rio Grande Valley on the lands granted by Spain's King Philip. So there's a vast history on this. As far as hauntings go, what I could kind of find, they say it's home to a friendly spirit, and they believe it's the ghost of Josefita Otero, who had lived in the home until her death in 1951. So, see, it starts way back when.
Yeah.
And so there's this vast history politically and all this stuff. So, but we can't get into all that. But yeah, she lived in the home until her death in 1951, and Josefita oversaw the renovations to her mansion when she was alive, and she grew so fond of the place that it seems like she decided to stick around through the decades. So this place is now a restaurant.
Cool.
Yeah, and it is. It's got these beautiful white pillars, and yeah, it's a.
Oh, that's really pretty.
That's a beautiful home.
That is gorgeous.
So it's a restaurant. You can go eat there. So let's go.
Yeah.
Might be the only thing worthwhile looking at in New Mexico.
Yeah, that we went through there.
It's a pretty desolate place. Let's just put it that way.
Other people in New Mexico were like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, I know. And the rest are going, yes, it is. All right. On to the state of Washington.
Ooh.
Now, I will say this selection of house, it's baffling why it makes this list, because I have heard of far more haunted places on the west side of Washington that are, houses. Like Port Townsend is essentially an entire haunted town in Washington state. But where do we go? We go to Spokane, Washington.
Place as a whole, man.
Can you guess the house?
In Spokane, Washington?
In Spokane, Washington.
Not right off the top of my head.
The Campbell House.
I'm not really familiar with it, so.
Neither was I. So this house was built in 1898. So it's a little older. It was built for Massa Campbell and his wife Grace. Now Campbell made a fortune of mining for mining exploration and operations in Coeur d'Alene, in the Coeur d'Alene region. So there are stories widely circulated around about the Campbells' 3 children being murdered in the house by an intruder in the early 1900s. And then the 4th child was kidnapped and never to be seen again.
Oh my gosh, that's so freaking sad.
It's crazy.
Oh.
Until you get to the fact that there's conflicting stories saying that they only ever had one kid whose name was Helen.
Did she get kidnapped?
She did not. She lived healthily into her adulthood.
Is this the same family?
Same family.
Huh.
So Grace Campbell's death in 1924, Helen, given the house, or Helen, the surviving daughter, gave the house to Eastern Washington State Historical Society in memory of her mother.
This is a big home.
It's a monster. And so now the house is actually a museum.
Surprise.
Yep, surprise. And there are some stories surrounding paranormal activity. There's a portrait of Amison Campbell in the house that says to follow the visitors with its eyes.
Oh, geez.
But there's a way to do these paintings that give you the perspective that it makes you look like the eyes are following you.
Yes, there is a way to do that.
And so the other items are there are sightings of children playing in the bedrooms, mysterious noises, and feelings or unsettling feelings and feelings of dread in the house.
Okay, we are on to the Nicholson Rand House in Indianapolis, Indiana. So it's a big home, but for the time, not big to our standards now. I would say it's a pretty normal size house for our standards now. But the Nicholas House in Indianapolis started to gain public notoriety in 1997 when it was moved for the purpose of preserving it from the original location in Southport Road to a short distance away. While in the process of moving the house, one photographer from an Indianapolis newspaper took a picture of the house. And the photo, many people believe, captured the image of a ghost in the house looking out an upstairs window, but there was no one inside the house at the time. A former resident of the house was told that it was once used as a boarding house. And during its years as a boarding house, a resident hanged himself in one of the bedrooms upstairs, but there's no proof of this ever happening. There is also another story that the house was a stop on the Underground Railroad. There are stories that a group of slaves were burned to death in the basement after a fire.
Oh, geez.
To escape persecution, the family closed them off in the basement. It's said that their screams can be heard throughout the house.
Oh, that's unnerving.
Mm-hmm. Some people have also claimed seeing blood dripping through the walls, as well as distinct smell of decaying flesh.
And then that is terrifying.
Yes.
The blood dripping through the walls, generally something like that, scary or how do you want to call it? Not real, is generally something that you're given to see as like a vision, right? Not something that's actually happening on the walls.
Right.
Right.
Because it's like, oh, you blink and then it's gone.
Right.
But like generally when you smell something that bad, like the decaying flesh, or you smell something rancid or, whatever, it's generally a sign that there's an evil spirit around. So I wonder what has happened in that house, because I didn't get information on what happened in the house to make it be so haunted. But I guess other than the slaves being burned to death in the basement, I mean, that's story enough, right? But super sad.
Very sad. Tragic. All right.
You can tell we're winding down.
I know.
Super sad. Moving
All right,
on.
so
You know how horrible that was? It was so tragic.
all right, moving on. All right, so the next one we come to is New York City, and it's called the House of Death.
Well, that sounds like a pleasant place.
Yeah, I mean, let's book it now.
Is it in the neighborhood of terror?
So it's also known as the House of Death or the Death House. So it's referred to both ways.
Neither one is not good.
Yeah, neither one is good. The building itself, they say, is as pretty as any of the other revivalist Greek brownstones in one of New York's most prettiest neighborhoods. So it was actually built in 1856 on West 10th Street in Greenwich Village, which is now known and to this day is known as the House of Death. So it at one time or another has housed many of the city's bright and beautiful, including the wife of founder of the Metropolitan Underground Railroad and the Broadway Underground Railroad, Mr. James Borman Johnston. So Johnston was responsible for founding a reading room, library, and the famed 10th Street Studio, a collective with studios, galleries, and annual funding for resident artists, unique in New York City at the time. So after he died, his wealthy widow actually moved their daughters into the House of Death in the 1880s. So from there, the house just kind of seems to start earning its reputation kind of gradually after the Borman family stopped living there. So the first recorded incident of bad luck happened in 1897. So cycling celebrity Fred H. Andrew, the new owner and occupier of 14th West 10th Street, had a moment of bad luck. During his residency, as described in New York Times of August 9th, 1897, Andrew had a moment of reckless bicycle riding that caused him to hit a boy that was around 8 years old. The boy actually suffered a broken leg, and Andrew was actually arrested over it. The house's most famous tenant was Mark Twain. So
I've had one in here that says that there was Mark Twain. I didn't say it, but
yeah,
That man was everywhere.
it was the Hawaii one. He says he was in Hawaii.
yeah. So, Mark Twain, he's a legend of American literature. And the tail end of his writing career, he was a legend of American literature at the tail end of his writing career. But at the height of his celebrity, Twain, whose real name is Samuel Clemens, was a resident at the House of Death. Only 3 years after Fred H. Andrew, the cyclist, started a streak of bad luck.
Whoa.
So Mark Twain only lived in the house for a little over 12 months. So, just over a year. He was battling bankruptcy and churning out some of his rush but classic works. He was also fighting depression and not helped by the sad mustache he wore constantly. Blame it on the mustache. Twain was noted a ghost skeptic, yet he wrote of a clear and plain paranormal experience he had in his new home. So one evening, he witnessed a large piece of wood kindling move in the air all by itself. Thinking the wood was being moved by a rat, would the rat have wings? Did it?
Yeah.
He said moved in the air. So
Right?
Haven't you seen a rat fly? I mean, seriously.
Rat have wings. Didn't you know that?
the new and improved rat. They fly now.
That would not be good.
So thinking that the wood was being moved by a rat, that had some use for the wood. A new piece of furniture, perhaps. He shot it with his gun. I mean, that's what anyone would do, right?
The wood or the rat?
I don't know.
He shot the wood. It's like, no rat gonna use my wood.
So then it suddenly fell to the ground and surrounded by a few drops of blood. Rats outnumbered people in New York at the time, but the house was noted for having an infestation. So Mark Twain maintained the blood was that of a rodent and not that of a ghost. I mean, ghosts don't bleed that I know of. So
We haven't asked them. We should ask them.
hey, put it on the list. Okay. So although Twain did not have many pleasant memories of the death house, I mean, I can't imagine why, he can still be seen roaming the stairwell of the house, and occupants have seen him trudging up and down the stairs, commonly considered the most haunted section of the home. They think he may also be responsible for disembodied marching sounds that have been heard everywhere in the vacant parts of the house. There's one notable Mark Twain encounter that was reported in the late 1930s. By 1937, the house had been converted into a co-op building made up of 10 spacious condo apartments. There's just a lot. So Mark Twain, he died in Danbury, Connecticut, and not at the New York house. But they're wondering why he appears there so often. It's kind of a mystery.
Well, maybe it's one of those things where people are calling him. You find out that Mark Twain lived there. Hey, Mark Twain, come hang out.
You never know.
People are like, all right.
Yeah. Other residents, like there's this one gal who her and her daughter took up a residency there in one of the apartments on the top floor in 1957. She was a famous actress, psychic, and writer, and she moved in the apartment, which once housed servants, and she reported that almost immediately a monstrous moving shadow would often follow her around the house. So one time she writes that she'd seen a ghostly figure of a man standing in the hall. So bravely, she reached out and tried to touch whatever she was seeing, and she felt something, but nothing like she had ever felt before. She described it as a substance without substance. Chilly, damp, kind of like marsh mist or a cloud of, I don't know, ether is what she says.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say marshmallow.
No, marshmallows. So she said, I could feel my fingers freeze at the tips. They were numb, and yet they tingled. So in the split second between contact and recoil, a scent came, fragile and sweet. So it was very The scent was very, very, very sweet. It says the scent was not only odd and bitter, but another family reported smelling the same thing during their time at the House of Death. And it actually goes on. There's actually quite a few haunting reports in here.
Why is it that they call it the House of Death?
I'm not sure.
Like, did a lot of people get murdered there, die there? Like,
so one event put the status of the house in the position of few doubters. And on November 2nd, 1987, New York City witnessed a genuine tragedy at the House of Death. The murder of Lisa Nussbaum was twisted. Nussbaum has a twisted plot worthy of a Hollywood horror flick.
okay,
So it made headlines.
okay, so that's a little bit better.
Yeah, so it happened around 6:40 a.m. 911 operators got a pressing phone call from children's author and editor, Hedda Nussbaum. She said that her 6-year-old daughter, Lisa, wasn't breathing, so an ambulance was sent to her Greenwich residence right away. When the paramedics arrived, they were greeted by a very disturbing scene. They found Lisa, the daughter, lying naked and unresponsive on the kitchen floor, and her brother, Mitchell, tied to a playpen and soaked in his own urine. So the author herself was covered with bruises and had several broken bones. Investigators also discovered marijuana, cocaine, over 20 crack pipes, and $25,000 in cash in the apartment.
Jeez.
And they got a little picture of her little daughter. So they were regrettably unable to revive the little girl on their way to the hospital. Later, her autopsy revealed that the cause of her death was repeated blunt force trauma to her skull. So Lisa's father and mother were both arrested, and they were charged with her murder, first-degree murder, after a cocaine binge. Her dad violently abused both Lisa and his wife, which would explain the bruises on his wife, Hedda.
And the broken bones.
Yes. The jury found him guilty of manslaughter in the second degree and sentenced him to a term in jail. So upon his release in 2004, he left the law behind and took construction jobs. Like the mansion in Amityville horror films, the House of Death also became the residence of a real-life monster. And it just keeps going.
Jeez.
Huh.
So this goes on. This has a long list. So I can kind of see why they're calling it the Death House or...
Right?
The House of Death.
So that was like one of many deaths that occurred in the house.
Tragic things. Yeah.
Jeez.
That's terrible.
And it goes on.
Well,
So.
sometimes I wonder if houses are, I don't necessarily believe in curses, right? But if some houses are just, there's something about them. Like I've investigated a house that all the people that lived there ended up getting divorced, like 3 or 4 couples.
Wow.
You know, and then they ended up moving out within a year or, you know, like things like that. And you're just wondering,
You have to wonder if
what entity,
yeah.
you know, is causing these people to fall
and
apart.
amplifying it.
And yeah.
They're feeding off of like maybe an argument between a married couple. And they're feeding off of it and they're amplifying it to the point where there's divorce.
Yeah. So it makes you wonder when there's houses like that, you're like, what is in that house that is causing all of this?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Like I would definitely guess that it was something that's in the type 3 category.
Right.
For sure. Something that just wants to play on human misery.
Oh, absolutely. That's their target.
Yeah. And I mean, you find it all over the place, right? There's always these places that are just awful.
Yeah.
And so with that, we will move on to a true castle.
Hey.
Josh is happy. He finally gets to do a true castle one.
It is called Berkeley Castle in Berkeley Springs.
Imagine that.
I know.
Berkeley Street. I'm just kidding.
You're right. So the area itself has links all the way back to George Washington in 1776.
Wow.
Where they actually found these springs that were coming up, these mineral springs are coming up from the ground, and they don't know where it's coming from. They've never been able to figure out where the water's coming from, but it always stays a nice 74 degrees and flows at 1,000 gallons a minute.
Yeesh, that's a lot of water.
That's moving. You know, and funny enough, this whole area, you know, it's called Bath is one of the names they gave it. And it was also known as the seat of sin by traveling preachers because of the gambling and horse racing and just general unruliness in the area. So we'll fast forward a little bit to 1885, and you get Colonel Tyler Suit. He begins laying the foundation for his cottage, right? And a couple years earlier, he ends up marrying this lady by the name of Rosa Pelham. She's a daughter of an Alabama congresswoman, and she is 30 years his junior.
Ooh, she's a youngin', or he's an old man.
And you really, really hope he's 50 and older.
Yeah.
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 So the girl's at least 20, we're hoping.
At least.
Exactly. And, the work continued on, and it was finished, and it was called one of the finest residences of the state. Suit and Rosa and their 3 children occupied the place until August 1887. And so they had multiple places built on the property. And the first description of Suit's cottage as a castle was made in the local Mercury in 1886, when it was described while under construction as giving one of the impressions of a handsome castle nestled amongst the rocks and cliffs and mountains. The description was repeated often in 1888 edition of the Martinsburg Independent. We get to September 1888, and after a brief illness, Suit dies, because obviously he's 30 years her senior, so
Yeah.
it's not gonna take long. He for some time was engaged in the liquor business and connected to the Washington City and Point Lookout Railroad Company. So he had some money rolling around. Well, obviously Rosa inherits the property, inherits the money, and she throws some lavish parties, kind of, generally loves living there. She even takes another suitor. And so she had engaged in an on-again, off-again romance with Malcolm Crichton. So he was a horseman and owner of the Ravenswood, which is a large estate out in West Virginia.
So he had money of his own. Yeah.
Kind of neat things is in 1895, water and electricity were put in the castle.
Wow.
So up until that point, they had no running water and no electricity.
Mm-hmm. That's a game changer right there.
Right?
Exactly. So in 1902, the castle was initially reported to be rented for the summer to a New York millionaire, Howard Gould. So it's kind of had a lot of people coming through. And the cool thing is in 2000, the property was bought by a paranormal investigation group.
Who? Zach Baggins?
No, just a local group out of West Virginia.
Oh, that's awesome.
I know. They bought it for $370,000.
Cool.
And they turned it into kind of a haunted bed and breakfast type of scenario.
Yeah.
Which is super neat. I don't know if it's still running as that. If you look it up, it says permanently closed. So,
maybe not.
Maybe not. But it is reported to be haunted by Mr. Samuel Sweet and his wife Rosa. But it's kind of tough to get any real true stuff out of there, just because, or real definitions of hauntings, just because it's been closed for so long.
Yeah.
To the general public.
So now we go to a famous place that I'm sure a lot of us have heard about is and this is where it's going to be hard for me to say because it's so late. Villisca Axe Murder House.
Basilica.
See, I'm telling you, Villisca. I don't know. I don't know how I got that.
It's in Basilica, Iowa.
Thank you. I knew I was going to have a struggle. Okay, so this has such a sad story behind it. So this family had a few kids, and their daughter wanted to have a sleepover. So a couple of friends came over and was sleeping over. And between midnight and 5 a.m., the murders take place of every single one of the family members. They found 2 spent cigarettes in the attic, suggesting that the killer or killers patiently waited in the attic of the Moore family while they slept. And so the 2 girls that stayed was Stillinger. The last name was Stillinger. The killer or killers were never caught. They began in the master bedroom where the husband Josiah and wife Sarah Moore were sleeping. Josiah received more blows from the axe than any other victim, and his face had been cut so bad that his eyes were missing.
Whoa.
The ceiling in his room also had a gouge mark from when the murderer lifted the axe up to murder him. The killer or killers used the blade of the axe on Josiah while using the blunt end on the rest of the victims. Herman, Mary Catherine, Arthur, and Paul were next, and they were bludgeoned in the head with the same manner as their parents. Afterwards, the murderer returned to the master bedroom to inflict more blows on the elder Moores, knocking over a shoe that had been filled with blood, before moving downstairs to the guest bedroom and killing Ina and Lena. Seemingly afterwards, a 4-pound slab of bacon was taken out of the icebox and laid next to the axe. Investigators also found untouched food and bloody water during their search. So they believe that all of the victims, except for Lena Stillinger, had been asleep during the murder, because they think that she was awake because she had wounds on her from fighting back.
Oh, like defensive wounds.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And they found her laying crosswise across the bed with defensive wounds on her arms. Lena's nightgown was pushed up above her waist, and she wasn't wearing any underwear. So you can tell where that went. A super sad story. And the dude was never caught.
They did try. I think it was the neighbor or uncle. They tried somebody a couple times, and they never got a conviction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So today, visitors report bedroom doors opening and shutting on their own, unexplained sensations of being slapped or pinched, odd chills. And the house is small. I mean, this is not a big house, right? While cleaning one day, the guide heard someone walk upstairs and shut the dresser drawer or door. Thinking someone had broken in, he walked up the stairs to confront what he believed to be a trespasser. He said, "So I got up to kick this guy out, and nobody's up there." He said, "Talked to my buddies afterwards, and they're all saying, 'Oh, houses make noises.' Like, I'm fully aware of what a footstep is at this point in my life. I am not a complete idiot." So that's what kind of got me starting to stay the night. So we started sleeping there to find out more, get more paranormal instances happening. The tour guide had also witnessed objects moving, chairs rocking, and has even heard full conversations upstairs when no one else is inside the house. But he has never seen a ghost. But one time, a photography student took Hauser's photo with Civil War era camera that was in the attic. The photographer believed that the lighting was too dark and that the photo wouldn't turn out. But then when the photo was developed, he noticed a shadow behind him.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool, but a little scary too.
A little bit.
You know, it's a little bit of both.
But that one's just a sad story.
It's very sad. It's whoever this person or persons were, they either had like a personal grudge or they were just psychotic. I don't even know.
Well,
it seemed like it was done with a lot of anger.
It does, but there was something deliberate about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
To use the sharp edge on one individual and then use the blunt edge on everybody else, that shows there's a very methodical, very thought process out, and that I would say that he had some sort of huge grudge against Josiah.
Well, and so he goes in the room, kills them, leaves, and then went back.
Exactly.
To do more.
Yeah.
So he was feeling something.
A lot of unhappiness.
Yeah.
Personal, yeah.
But yeah, I can imagine, because of all of that energy that has gone into that house, I can imagine that it would be haunted or something's going on.
And you can still stay there today.
You can.
You can still sleep in the house, people.
If you dare.
Just not on the beds. They don't let you sleep on the beds. You got to sleep on the floor.
Well, the beds are really dainty and old.
I'd probably fall right through it.
They're not meant for the modern day American's ample frame.
We've grown a little bit.
American heft. Yeah.
Tall and wide. In every direction.
and circular. Okay, so from there, we move on to North Carolina.
Ooh.
And a place called the Biltmore Estate.
And it is beautiful.
It is
I mean,
huge.
this is the biggest one.
It's gorgeous. So there is a lot of information on this one about like the building and stuff and what's there. The gardens and just everything in between. But it's massive and it's gorgeous. So I encourage you to kind of, go and look it up, check it out.
Yeah.
And I believe you can do tours.
Yes.
There.
They have all of it. So it's a famed and massive estate. And when you see the picture, you'll
understand.
You'll understand.
Massive is an understatement.
And so they say where you can possibly run into the original owners.
Oh.
Ooh.
So, and they are known as George and Edith Vanderbilt. So even though George died in 1914 and then Edith in 1958, they say they both still haunt the home. So
This looks more like a castle to me.
it does, right?
Yes.
It's very castle-esque.
Yes.
So George has been seen walking the grounds, which beautiful grounds. I would walk it too, even after I was dead.
No kidding.
Keep walking it.
So while they hear Edith's voice calling out to George, so they've heard her calling for him. The two have also been heard laughing together in certain rooms.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah.
Okay, can we take a guess how big this place is?
I know the square footage.
I do too.
Let me see a picture.
Okay. And that's not even all of it. It's huge.
I'm gonna say 85,000 square feet.
You're not even close.
You're way short.
Whoa,
It is 175,000 square feet.
Yeah.
that is
Which is more, it says, which is more than 4 acres of floor space.
Yeah. Can you imagine? I can't even
35
imagine.
bedrooms.
Yep.
43 bathrooms.
Yep.
65 fireplaces.
65.
Holy junk.
Yeah.
It's huge.
and this is someone's house.
This was someone's
It
house.
Right.
was.
At one time.
How many people did they need to clean the house, or
An army
to start the fireplaces,
to
or
stoke those 65 fireplaces.
I wonder
Yeah.
how many times you went in a room and you're like, oh, I'll never go in that room again.
Right?
Because it's so big. You're like, when am I going to wander over here?
Right? Exactly. Well,
I haven't been in the
exactly.
West Wing in 6 years.
Man.
This place is massive. It is definitely one I would like to go see. Just not so much to investigate it, but to go there, to walk the grounds,
To look at the beautification of it. I
to
believe.
just look at
Yeah,
it.
and I'm almost positive my husband has been there because he lived in North Carolina. He was born in, Baton Rouge, but then moved there as a kid. So I'm pretty sure he told me that he went on a tour there. And I'm like, are you kidding me? He's like, oh yeah. I remember him talking about this amazing, beautiful home. I'm like, I'm pretty sure this is it.
Wow.
That's cool,
Add it to the list. Another one.
right?
Add them all to the list, honestly.
They're all on the list.
So what ghost hunting things, ghosts have been reported there?
Mainly, they're saying it's George and Edith,
Just them.
that they have seen them and heard them.
I mean, why
laughing.
wouldn't you when you build something like
They
that?
seem like a happy couple.
Right.
I mean,
Right?
that's when I read this, even though it's so just kind of short and to the point, it just gives you this feeling, like the impression you get from it is they were just a very lovable couple.
Yeah, and
Like very much in love,
Yeah.
had, laughed together and all those things.
how fun. That's just cute.
It sounds like they
It's
had
so
an
awesome.
amazing marriage and
Yeah.
relationship. So,
And built a phenomenal home.
Oh, my head.
Yeah.
Jeez.
yeah,
That's home for
a lot of people.
Let's see, 175,000 square
100,
feet.
yeah, 100. Actually, mine said 178,000.
178,000 square feet. Really only need about 500 square feet per couple. So
That's even a lot.
So that's like 360 couples.
How How would that be?
Just to put it in perspective.
I think I did the math wrong too, people.
But seriously, look this up. It is a beautiful place. It is
Dig in a little
gorgeous.
bit. Look at the pictures of it. They got some beautiful photography of it.
It's a destination place for sure.
Yes. It should be, if it's not on your list, put it on there.
Put it on the list.
I wonder if it's been in movies. I bet it's been in movies.
Oh, we could always look that up. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure.
I'm going to look it up right now.
I mean, if they allowed it, like the only way it wouldn't have been is if they said no. But why wouldn't you want it for like a filming location?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I mean,
It's gorgeous. It's impressive.
Oh my gosh, it's got a list: Forrest Gump, Murder on the Orient Express, The Last of the Mohicans, Hannibal, Richie Rich, Patch Adams, Being There, My Fellow Americans. It's got
a few.
It's got plenty. Yep.
Not surprising.
No,
Not surprising.
And the list goes on. So that's cool.
that's awesome.
21 times.
Jeez. All right, so we'll move on to the Great Cheese State.
Wisconsin.
Exactly. Look, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. It's the only place I've ever been driving on the interstate where you get a gigantic sign that says cheese, and this tiny little sign underneath it that says gas.
I love it.
So we're going to talk about the Octagon House, and it is in Fond du Lac. Man, I am...
It's where?
Fond du Lac.
Fondue Lake.
Oh,
Yeah.
so like cheese. So should we bring some bread and
We should. It'd be great.
our little
Fondue.
forks, long forks?
It was first built by Isaac Brown in 1856, who actually was the first mayor of the town. So, and he built it on an old settlement and trading post. The interesting thing is that this is an actual octagon-shaped home.
That's cool.
And on the first floor, there's 4 rooms. And on the second floor, there are 7 rooms.
I was gonna say you skipped a few.
Right? And it's because it's, an octagon, there's a central staircase that goes up and down, spiral staircase. It's not that makes this place so interesting. There are actually 9 secrets to this house.
Ooh, do tell.
That's cool.
So there's a false fireplace in the parlor that conceals a small wooden staircase. If you take the staircase, it brings you to a basement tunnel, then to the river.
Oh, that's so cool.
There's a small storage room concealed beneath the porch. There's a crawl space behind the panels of fake drawers in the upstairs bedroom that leads into a secret room. There, a message scratched into the wall dated in 1888 seems to give directions to the next safe house along the Underground Railroad.
Oh,
How cool.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
He obviously was involved in the Underground Railroad. They're helping slaves journey north to Ontario.
I love hearing about these stories.
I do too.
I am so fascinated with the Underground Railroad. It's beautiful. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, and the people that were running it, they were just as much as everybody else putting their lives on the line.
Yeah.
Their lives, their livelihood, everything was on the line to get these people out.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like it was a beautiful gift that they gave these people running from being slaves. So
Which the one behind the fireplace with the tunnel, the thing that led down to the river would make total sense.
Exactly.
yeah. But I would always wonder later, though, I'd be like, man, what if somebody comes into my house that way?
Just make sure it's really locked up and blocked off.
Yeah.
Because that would be scary.
It would be, definitely.
So some people think that the secret spaces weren't used for the Underground Railroad, that they were used during Prohibition.
I was going to say, what, the little drink?
Yep. To
First
transport
one,
liquor.
then the other.
First, and it's
it
very
could be
possible.
both, though.
Yeah.
I mean, really, it could be both.
Yep.
Because
That's what I'm thinking.
the Underground Railroad would have been running in the 1800s, where obviously Prohibition was until the 1900s.
Yeah. So, like I'm saying, it could be both.
Yep.
Yep, exactly. So obviously, bootlegging was pretty popular there. It earned the city earned its reputation during Prohibition as Little Chicago. So obviously, it's really close to Chicago, and there you got Bugsy Malone, Al Capone. They're running all of their stuff during Prohibition.
Yeah. That would be a scary place.
Yeah. It would be crazy. So Edwin and his wife raised 3 kids there, Lewis, Edward, and Hattie. And of course, Civil War breaks out, and Edwin joins his friend Edward on the battlefield for the Union, and Edwin doesn't come back home.
That's sad.
He died in the Battle of Antietam in 1862. So the hauntings here are really just believed to be a ghost of a young boy, probably maybe one of the sons. Hard to say. They get some weird shadows and things moving around in the house. Like there's not really...
So nothing like scary.
Typical.
Yeah, it's kind of the typical benign haunting.
Standard. We'll
Yeah.
call it standard haunting.
See, and if you guys notice, a lot of these are very benign, very calm hauntings. It's not like reaching out and scaring you. I mean, there's some that are like that, but for the most part, these are pretty calm.
Yeah,
Calm hauntings compared to what it could be.
exactly.
Yeah, the Sally house in, here we go again. Atchison, Kansas.
Yes. Atchison.
Oh, man. Okay, so I apologize for people that live there. I'm so sorry. It's late again. Now it's 4, so...
Jeez. Man.
It's Saturday, guys. Okay. Originally built at the turn of the century, this house became the residence of the Atchison physician. Oh, this is going to be hard. The front served as an office space and examination rooms, while the doctor and his family lived upstairs. One day, a frantic mother arrived carrying her 6-year-old daughter, Sally, and the child collapsed from severe abdominal pain. I think we've heard this a few times.
Yeah.
The doctor diagnosed appendicitis and knew there was no time to delay surgery. So, believing that the appendix would soon burst, the doctor began cutting Sally before the anesthesia took full effect.
Oh, jeez.
Okay, let me tell you, I know what that's like. I had a C-section without being numb. So,
Ow.
yeah, so I can tell you that, like, your body goes into shock. You feel like you're on fire, right? Like, the cutting across your stomach, you literally feel like you're on fire, and then your body goes into shock. And I started kind of like hallucinating at that point. Not hallucinating, but like almost like my blood sugar dropped or something, and I was just out of it,
Yeah.
not making a whole lot of sense. And so I can imagine that this was a struggle. Sally screams, and then suddenly, and I did the same thing, but then she stopped and she grew pale and limp. She ended up dying on the operating table. So her last memories was of a man she thought was torturing her, because
Oh, jeez.
she's only 6.
Yeah, she's very young.
She doesn't really know what's going on, right?
Yeesh.
And when you're in that much pain, you're not paying attention to what's really going on around you.
Right.
Though the house had long been known to be haunted, Sally's haunting grew ominous in 1993 when the house was rented to a young couple. Their dog seemed to growl at nothing, especially near the upstairs nursery. Things began to take a violent turn. However, fires broke out in the house and a series of sinister attacks on the husband began, which would make sense.
That does make sense.
The operating area would become cold. Objects would visibly move when the young man drew near. He could feel scratches on his chest and his abdomen, but never did the ghost attack the wife or the baby.
Just the man.
Just the
Just
man. Well,
the
think
man.
about it. The doctor operating on her before she dies, last thing she remembers, like Elisa said, is being what she thought was tortured
Yep.
Yep.
by a man.
Uh-huh.
So that totally makes sense why she would target the man.
Totally makes sense.
It's super sad.
It's very sad that she's, just the excruciating pain, the thinking, why is this person doing this to me, causing me so much pain,
Yeah.
and she's angry. How angry can a 6-year-old be, though?
Well, a 6-year-old who has now unlimited
Time.
and energy.
Right.
And is able to like process,
That's true. That's a scary thought. That's really a scary thought.
Well, and I wonder if sometimes it's like, it's such a big moment of death that you wonder how much they hold on to that last moment.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something that tragic, that perceived violent,
Right.
right? You'd imagine
Which
they
was
probably
really meant to be helpful, but wasn't.
right. But I mean, how many 6-year-olds understand what surgery is, especially if you've never had it done, never seen it done, and you're in a lot of pain, and
then you get more pain.
You get more pain,
And it's not even like you're numb. They're not even to that point. It's just like, nope, we're cutting open.
Yeah.
Now's the time. We can't wait anymore. And now, so my doctors told me, they're like, sorry, we got to go. And it's terrifying. It is absolutely terrifying.
I can only imagine.
But I had drugs that they gave me that finally kicked in later.
right?
Which I was able to calm down and stuff. But legit, she did not.
It's terrifying.
Oof.
Yeah, she was probably just terrified. So I actually want Josh to do this one because I know he had mentioned earlier that this is one that he wanted to do.
Only because I grew up in the state.
So, well, that's where your grandma and grandpa lived.
Yep.
And so I want you to do that one so you can pull it up on your tablet and get more information, because that is just like a little snippet.
That is a little snippet.
It's not much. No.
We are going to talk about Fort Abraham Lincoln and the Custer House. So this is located in Mandan, North Dakota, which if you don't know where that's at, that's okay. Most people don't. It's actually just across the Missouri River from Bismarck. So Bismarck being the state capital, it's just across the river. It's just a smaller town. One of the reasons why I wanted to do this is not just because I grew up in North Dakota. It's actually because I have been to Fort Abraham Lincoln probably 24 times growing up.
Oh, that's neat.
And I mean, there's not much there at the property. So there's on one side of the property, you have some of the Mandan Indian earthen mounds. So, all of the dwellings that the Native Americans or indigenous people lived in, right, were always, varying upon where they lived. And so the Mandan tribe, they were an agrarian culture. So they actually farmed. And so because the Missouri River is very fertile, it floods every year, great place to grow your crops. They built earthen lodges. So big earth domes.
Oh, neat.
Is what they were built out of. And
Cool.
then in the inside, there's wood and stuff to hold the structure up. And there was some of the ones are 4, 5, 6 families would live in it together.
Really?
Ooh.
Yeah.
So they were good sized.
They were huge.
Wow.
That would be cool to see.
I'd love to see something like
Right?
Yeah. They're super cool. And now the Fort Abraham Lincoln, there's not much left in the fort. There's the palisades are up, and there's some reconstructed guardhouses. But the interesting thing about them is instead of being a straight up and down guardhouse, it's actually like 2 blocks that have been twisted.
Oh, weird.
that. That's different.
Yeah. It's super different. And, the main purpose of the fort was a trade center for people heading west. So Fort Abraham Lincoln, for those people that were traveling west to the Oregon Trail, that was one of the last stops. So if you remember in the movie Dances with Wolves, he stops at the fort. That was Abraham Lincoln.
Cool.
Yep. So, and of course, General Custer built his house on the property.
Not custard.
Custer.
Custer.
I like to call- look, he got turned into custard, okay?
General Custard.
Yeah,
Mr. Green.
Mr. Green. That's mustard. He didn't actually spend a lot of time in there before he ended up meeting his untimely demise in 1876.
No.
Like a lot of things in the area, that was lost to time, right? The building was actually destroyed. So they actually rebuilt it in 1989. And it seems like when they rebuilt the building, the spirits kind of came back.
Something familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what people end up experiencing, there's a woman in black dressing.
Oh, this is new.
Yeah, a woman in black, not a man in black, not Johnny Cash. A woman in black, and she's seen looking out the second floor window of Custer's house. And maybe it's actually his widow.
I was gonna say, is she in mourning?
Yeah, that's what they say. It's reported that she haunts the home, and a lot of witnesses have reported seeing Miss Custer in her full mourning gown, along with hearing phantom voices and seeing the lights go on and off. So, but they believe that his wife is among one of the spirits haunting there.
Oh, that's sad.
And then, you got footsteps heard pacing back in the sergeant's quarters in the barracks.
That would make sense.
Yep. Voices of weeping women echoing along the boardwalk.
Yeah.
A shadowy figure stalking the commissary at night. Horses' hooves stomping the dirt in the stalls and the stables.
That's so cool to me.
Yeah. I mean, I would probably willing to bet that's probably residual.
Yeah.
Well, it's like when we went to Bannock. Remember the one EVP we got of a horse?
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
Yeah. It was neat.
It was neat. So they got some new paranormal phenomena that's been listed. They got some orbs.
Ooh, dusty ones.
Yeah.
Couple dust bunnies
Yeah.
floating around.
So yeah, that's all of it. Honestly, if you're ever out in that area of North Dakota, I highly recommend going and take a look at it. It's a really neat place to go.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And the nice thing is it's not far from the town, so it doesn't take long to get there. And there's not a lot there, so you don't have to spend a lot of time there.
But something definitely worth seeing.
Definitely something worth seeing.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot of different culture that you don't normally get to see.
Yeah.
And so it's neat to be able to see some of that stuff. And then we move on to the last place on our list.
Which is...
I want you guys to look at this and tell me if this looks familiar.
Yes, it does.
Yes,
What?
Wyoming.
I just realized this. Why did I
Yes.
not?
No.
Yes,
It's right by the prison.
it is.
And we were like, we need to go there.
Well, remember we
'Cause
saw
we're like,
a
we wanna
picture.
Yeah, we're like, we can stay here
Yeah.
on like Verbo or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we had went to eat at this one place and we'd seen a picture and we're like, oh, that's a beautiful home.
Yeah.
And then as we were kind of driving around the area to go see, like scope out the prison the day before
Yeah.
just to see what it looked like and get some daytime pictures, we saw the house and I was like, that's the house in the picture. And Lisa's like, oh, you're right. And then it says there was a sign out there saying
For rent.
you could rent out a room in there.
Yeah.
You could rent out rooms.
Yeah. And it is Ferris Mansion in Rawlings, Wyoming.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I saw that picture. I'm
beautiful.
like, oh.
That's funny. I'm sitting here staring at it. And once you said that, I was like, oh, bling, ding, 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 ding.
Yeah,
Lights on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
That's awesome.
So in 1899, the construction began on the mansion for George Ferris and his wife, Julia. By then, George had mainly made his fortune as a sole owner of the Ferris Haggerty Mine in the Grand Encampment Copper Mining District. But in 1900, before the house was finished, George was killed in a tragic accident when he was thrown from a runaway carriage near his own mine.
Oh, that's
jeez.
sad.
Just,
What luck.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you wouldn't expect any of these houses not to have some form of tragedy associated to them.
Yeah. Lots of accidents, misfortunes.
Yeah, exactly. So the work continued on the house and was completed in 1903. And then Julia Ferris lived there in the house until 1931, where she passed away at the age of 76. She and George had 7 children. But having already suffered the loss from her children, Julia was soon endured further family tragedy. 3 years after George's death, her youngest son Cecil was accidentally shot and killed by his older brother while playing with a gun that went off unexpectedly.
Playing with a gun.
Don't
Yikes.
play with guns.
Ever.
It's not good. Two of her other children were also died, Edna 10 and Delia May age 1. After that, Julia was declined to complete many of the touches she and George had planned. So the house had once loved remained unfinished until after she died.
Oh, sad.
Which I get. Like at first it's like, okay, my husband died. We'll make it, I
We'll
can
mourn,
make it work.
we'll carry on.
And then 3 children
3 of your 7 children.
die as well.
That is
Yeah.
so sad.
Yeah.
And each time it's just, you don't ever recover from any one of them, but to have 3,
Yeah.
I could understand where you just lose all
All hope.
hope, all interest, all anything.
Yeah. Why would you want to finish the dream home that's now become a tragedy home.
Well, you just recede into this darkness of depression and
You don't want to do anything
Mourning.
at that point.
No.
Exactly.
That's like the last thing on your mind.
Exactly. So in 1940, Ferris Mansion was converted into apartments, but after a time, the whole building fell into disrepair and was eventually bought by the Lubers in 1978, who carried out extensive renovations, including returning the house to a single residence, and in 1982 was placed on the National Registry of Historic Places. Then in 1986, the Lubers were granted a license from Wyoming to be the first bed and breakfast, which they continued until 1997.
Oh,
Well, it seems like it's like the only one of its kind in that area.
yeah.
Because all the other places, all the other homes are, like near typical 1-story,
Yeah.
two-story maybe home, But like
This one really stands out.
it really, really did stand
It's
out.
the color, like it's multicolored.
Well, it's just the size of it. It's just the
architecture.
It just
Yeah.
all really draws your eye.
Yeah, it's really, really neat. So obviously the place changed hands quite a few times until 2010. And then for obviously it's considered one of the most haunted places, or wouldn't be on this list we're talking about today. But the haunting started back in the 1940s.
Oh, okay.
So workmen converting the mansion into apartments claimed to have witnessed apparitions and other unexplained activity. According to the reports, some days the men were driven out of the house in terror. One report even alleges that 2 of the men died in mysterious circumstances while on site.
Oh, that's kind of scary. I wonder if there's like any documentation on. I guess we'd have to dig a little bit.
I would bet with Rawlings being as small of a town as it is, if you can get to the archives, the newspaper archives, you could find something located on that.
Right.
Yeah.
Those deaths would have been reported. So later claims of the Harris Mansion's hauntings, including when families were living there as apartments. So it was widely believed that these ghostly sightings are probably associated with Julia Ferris and her children. Full-bodied apparitions have been witnessed on more than one occasion, including forms of 2 young boys, one whom was believed to be young Cecil. Another reported a sighting of a woman wearing a long white Victorian nightgown, believed to be Julia Ferris. So would that be a woman in white?
Yep.
Technically, yeah. Why not?
Right? Usually it's a dress, but nightgown dress, it's pretty close.
Their nightgowns were fancy.
They were. The ghostly figure had been seen in many different rooms throughout the house, but particularly in the kitchen, where she is thought to still be absorbed in the household task as she cares for her family.
Oh.
Many residents and visitors have reported unexplained electrical problems with lights around the house frequently flickering or even turning on and off. Whispering voices are sometimes heard where no one is there. Footsteps or knocking sounds have been heard along corridors and in empty rooms. And shadows have been seen in front of a room where somebody is believed to have died, but these shadows have no source.
Wow.
That's so cool. That sounds like a pretty active place.
I know
It
where we're
does.
staying next time.
In one room.
That's
All
right.
together.
Yeah.
What? We're going to rent the whole mansion? Oh, it's
You can't. I think
can't.
she
It's
lives there.
by the room.
I think somebody lives there
I think so. I think it's listed.
because I believe it's on VRBO.
Yeah.
It's actually listed for sale. I don't know if it's actually been sold,
Well, okay. So
but whoa.
We're buying
what's
it,
the date
right?
on that, on where you're getting your information?
January 26, 2021.
Okay.
So it's 2 years ago.
2 years ago. So it may have been already changed hands
Because we just went this year.
We
Yeah.
did.
last
So-
year.
So
Was
it's
it last
listed.
year?
2022.
Oh, now we're in 2023. Hot
Yeah.
dang.
It was listed at $825,000
But
I believe it.
and is listed as a 8. Why can't they call it 8,000? 8 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, 7,999.
Just round
Square
up
feet.
one. Come on.
I'm sure you can find a square foot somewhere. All right, guys, that was
All 50.
all 50 states, 50 locations in 50 states,
Yes.
and quite a few of them you can go visit
Yeah.
and stay.
and stay or investigate.
Or eat at, because some are restaurants.
Some are restaurants.
Yeah.
And you can just put your K2 meter next to your fog wall as you're eating.
Fagua.
I don't know if they're that fancy, but yeah, why not?
I haven't even heard of that before.
Fagua?
It's goose liver.
That's disgusting. Why would you eat that?
We wouldn't. We just like saying fagua.
I was late. Early. Which way are we at now?
We're early at this point.
Yeah, we have gone past late. We have entered into early. So we just want to say, thank you everybody for hanging out and listening to all 50 states and 50 locations
And all the hauntings.
and all the hauntings,
And we hope that you join us for all of season 3.
which just concluded. It'll end at 4 episodes.
Yes. But I'm just saying, new season,
Absolutely.
new year. It's all exciting.
New stuff.
We got new stuff coming, new venues.
Some
All
that
of
you
it.
may have heard about by the time this episode airs.
Possibly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We'll have more pictures and more information posted up on our social media accounts. And where can they find us?
Lisa's like, not me.
I don't know. There's too many of them. I can't keep track.
So you can find us on Facebook at Cold Spot Paranormal Research, as well as Paranormal Peeps Podcast. He just tossed a card at her that gives all of it.
You can find us on Instagram at coldspot_paranormal_research or on Twitter at CPR Paranormal.
Absolutely. And please, everybody, rate, give us a review. We'd love to hear from you.
Feedback is great too. If you want to drop us an email, why don't you give them our email?
It's josh.raymond@paranormalhope.com.
Yeah. So drop us an email if you have suggestions or anything like that.
If there's anything you want us to cover, talk about, any stories that you want to share with us, we'd love to hear your stories, your experiences that you've had.
Yeah.
Maybe in the house that you grew up or just a place you visited or anything. We'd love to hear it.
Or if you've been in one of these 50 places.
Yeah.
Tell us your story.
Oh my gosh, that'd be stinking awesome.
Right?
But we'd also like to kind of have conversations and interact a little bit with our listeners out there this year.
Absolutely.
So,
And as always, everybody, stay ghosty, my peeps. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Paranormal Pete's.
Pete's? Paranormal Pete's? Who's Pete? Oh, you're Stinky Pete.
That's right. Paranormal Pete's.
Paranormal
Podcast.
Stinky Pete's.
We are, and continuing on with the 50 states of hauntingness. Holy cow.
This might be a bit rough, guys.
All right. Let's start that part over. We can add that one to the bloopers.
Yeah. All right. We are continuing on with laughing. Oh,
We are.
family.
Deep breath, Josh. Let's take it. Let's do it
Editing is
again.
going to be rough. So we are continuing on with our 50 states of hauntingness.
Cut.
Hauntingness.
Hauntings. Just hauntings.
I don't know why you're trying
I don't
to
know.
drag it out and extend the word.
We are continuing with our 50 states of hauntings.
We are on part 2.
Part 2?
Part 2.
We had that.
Part doo-doo. Doo-doo.
Do.
Oh, on a high note, our blooper reel is going to be good.
It's going to be awesome.
It's going to be full.
Yes, it is. All right. Yeah. Go. Thank you for listening to the Paranormal Peeps podcast. You can find us on social media at Twitter at CPR Paranormal, on Facebook at Paranormal Peeps Podcast and Cold Spot Paranormal Research. And you can find us on Instagram at coldspot_paranormal_research.